Yes, sir. Thank you. And thanks to the other speakers as well for those important lessons. Tonight, we're going to continue looking at the book of Jeremiah. And tonight, I want us to look particularly at the providence of God that we can see in the book of Jeremiah. When I talk about providence, what I'm talking about is the way God is working to carry out his plan, to protect people, whatever his plan is, but not in a miraculous way, in ways that we don't know how he's working, but he is definitely working in it. So I want us to look tonight at a few places where Jeremiah was really facing some terrible problems. Remember, God had promised Jeremiah that the people would fight against him. Everybody was going to fight against him, but they would not overcome him. So it wasn't that Jeremiah was going to have an easy time, but he could be bold because God was going to take care of him even in those very difficult circumstances. And we can see that God does keep that promise to Jeremiah. One of the things that he faced was death threats, and those death threats were never carried out. It's not that the people stopped being angry with him, but for various reasons, those death threats were not fulfilled. One of the death threats that we read about was from his own hometown of Anathoth. It reminds me of when Jesus was in Nazareth in Luke chapter 4, and the people wanted to throw him off the cliff. It's a very similar idea. When it's your hometown, they're embarrassed that you are saying these things that everybody's upset about. And sometimes the people where you're from are more upset about it than others as well. But in Jeremiah chapter 11, in verses 18 through 23, we read about this problem that Jeremiah had. And he begins in verse 18 saying, "Now the Lord gave me knowledge of it, and I know it, for you showed me their doings. But I was like a docile lamb brought to the slaughter, and I did not know that they had devised schemes against me, saying, 'Let us destroy the tree with its fruit, and let us cut him off from the land of the living, that his name may be remembered no more.' But, O Lord of hosts, you who judge righteously, testing the mind and the heart, let me see your vengeance on them, for to you I have revealed my cause. Therefore, thus says the Lord, concerning the men of Anathoth who seek your life, saying, 'Do not prophesy in the name of the Lord, lest you die by our hand.' Therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, behold, I will punish them. The young men shall die by the sword, their sons and their daughters shall die by famine," and so on. He's going to bring punishment on Anathoth because they're telling Jeremiah to stop prophesying in the name of the Lord, or they're going to kill him. And they don't do that. Now, Jeremiah says, I was like a docile lamb brought to the slaughter. I didn't even know that they were trying to kill me until the Lord told him about it. That's what they were saying. They were planning this. But God kept it from happening. We don't know what happened that they didn't carry this out, but Jeremiah never stopped prophesying in the name of the Lord, and they never killed him. And God ended up punishing them for their plan. The priests and the prophets also at different times demanded his death. And he ends up getting saved by some people that were not always on his side. The princes and the people at different times saved Jeremiah from being killed through the providence of God. In Jeremiah 26, in verse 2, it says, "Thus says the Lord, stand in the court of the Lord's house and speak to all the cities of Judah who come to worship in the Lord's house all the words that I command you to speak to them. Do not diminish a word. So God is telling Jeremiah, just preach it exactly how I tell you. Don't make it any lighter on them. So don't be afraid of how they're going to take it, basically. You just speak it the way that I tell you. And so he did. And when we get to verse 7 through verse 9, it says, So the priests and the prophets and all the people heard Jeremiah speaking these words in the house of the Lord. Now it happened when Jeremiah had made an end of speaking all that the Lord had commanded him to speak to all the people, that the priests and the prophets and all the people seized him, saying, You will surely die. Why have you prophesied in the name of the Lord, saying, This house shall be like Shiloh, and this city shall be desolate without an inhabitant? And all the people were gathered against Jeremiah in the house of the Lord. So here we have the priests, the prophets, and all the people telling Jeremiah, you're going to die. It's very similar to Stephen in Acts chapter 7, where they say he's prophesying against the temple, and they're very upset with him, and they actually do kill Stephen. In God's providence, he saw that was something that fit into his plan. Here, it did not fit into his plan for Jeremiah to be killed. And so even with all the people and the priests and the prophets saying, you're going to die for this, he's not going to die for it. In verse 10 through 16, let's read verse 10 through 12. It says, When the princes of Judah heard these things, so here's the leaders, they're not among the ones saying, you shall die. So they've heard these things. They came up from the king's house to the house of the Lord and sat down in the entry of the new gate of the Lord's house. And the priests and the prophets spoke to the princes and all the people, saying, This man deserves to die, for he has prophesied against this city as you have heard with your ears. Then Jeremiah spoke to all the princes and all the people, saying, The Lord sent me to prophesy against this house and against this city with all the words that you have heard. And he continues talking about that. And when we get down to verse 16, it says, So the princes and all the people said to the priests and the prophets, This man does not deserve to die, for he has spoken to us in the name of the Lord our God. So here the people apparently changed their mind. They were among those with the priests and the prophets before saying, You shall surely die. But now that the princes, the leaders of the people, princes doesn't necessarily mean sons of the king. It just means rulers under the king. But they have come, and now the people are convinced through what Jeremiah says, and perhaps what the princes are saying as well. You know what? This man doesn't deserve to die because he's not saying it from himself. He's speaking in the name of the Lord. And so he doesn't die. But there was another man who was very similar to him. If you keep reading and you go down to verse 20 through 24, there was another prophet. And it says, Now there was also a man who prophesied in the name of the Lord, Urijah, the son of Shemaiah of Kirjath-jearim, who prophesied against this city and against this land according to all the words of Jeremiah. And when Jehoiakim the king, with all his mighty men and all the princes heard his words, the king sought to put him to death. But when Urijah heard it, he was afraid and fled and went to Egypt. Then Jehoiakim the king sent men to Egypt, Elnathan the son of Achbor, and other men who went with him to Egypt. And they brought Urijah from Egypt and brought him to Jehoiakim the king, who killed him with the sword and cast his dead body into the graves of the common people. Nevertheless, the hand of Ahikam the son of Shaphan was with Jeremiah, so that they should not give him into the hand of the people to put him to death. So here, Urijah was also a prophet, saying exactly the same thing Jeremiah was saying. And when they wanted to kill him, he did not stand there like Jeremiah and explain to them, this is from the Lord. If you kill me, you're shedding innocent blood. That was part of what he told them. But Urijah was afraid and ran away. He did not trust in the protection of God and the providence of God to keep him safe, and yet even running away did not save him. He was killed. But here's Jeremiah staying in the middle of an angry mob with the priests and the prophets saying, let's put him to death, and he was saved from death. You can see that God has the power to protect his people. If he says, stand there and be bold and preach exactly what I've told you, then that's what we should do. That's what Jeremiah did, and God was able to protect him even in that situation. And of course, there were officials, the princes and other types of officials, the priests and the prophets, who tried to pressure Jeremiah to change what he was saying or to stop prophesying in various ways. But even when they did that, they didn't keep going. They didn't keep doing the same things to him, even when he did not back down, which is a little bit strange to me. But one of the situations was when he was locked up in stocks. And I have a little bit of a picture here of something that's it's wooden stocks where here the legs went through. I don't know how his were. If they, sometimes it's the head and the arms that go through. Sometimes it's the legs that go through. I'm not sure how these stocks were, but it's a shaming, mostly a shaming punishment. You put them in public, locked up like this, where everybody's coming by and seeing, oh, this person has done something bad, and it's a shameful thing. But I want us to read about this in Jeremiah 20 and verse 1 through 6. It says, now Pashur, the son of Immer the priest, who was also chief governor in the house of the Lord, heard that Jeremiah prophesied these things. Then Pashur struck Jeremiah the prophet and put him in the stocks that were in the high gate of Benjamin, which was by the house of the Lord. And it happened on the next day that Pashur brought Jeremiah out of the stocks. Then Jeremiah said to him, the Lord has not called your name Pashur, but Magor-Missabib. For thus says the Lord, behold, I will make you a terror to yourself and to all your friends, and they shall fall by the sword of their enemies, and your eyes shall see it. I will give all Judah into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall carry them captive to Babylon and slay them with the sword. And verse 6, and you, Pashur, and all who dwell in your house shall go into captivity. You shall go to Babylon, and there you shall die and be buried there, you and all your friends to whom you have prophesied lies. Do you see the boldness of Jeremiah? This man could have put him right back in the stocks. He had that authority. Or he might have done something even worse. But he didn't. It doesn't seem like he did anything more, even though what he tried to do to get Jeremiah to stop by putting him in these stocks, it didn't work. Jeremiah just continued prophesying exactly the same thing. There was another time he was confined from going to the temple, but even here God used his providence to provide a way for the word to still be preached, for the prophecy to be given to the people. In Jeremiah 36 and verse 4 through 6, then Jeremiah called Baruch, the son of Neriah, and Baruch wrote on a scroll of a book at the instruction of Jeremiah all the words of the Lord which he had spoken to him. And Jeremiah commanded Baruch, saying, I am confined. I cannot go into the house of the Lord. You go, therefore, and read from the scroll which you have written at my instruction the words of the Lord in the hearing of the people in the Lord's house on the day of fasting. And you shall also read them in the hearing of all Judah who come from their cities. So here, there's another faithful servant of God, Baruch, who happens to be a scribe. And Jeremiah has him write the words of the prophecy down and then go and read them, since Jeremiah cannot go himself. And then when the leaders, the princes, hear the prophecy, and in verse 19 through 20 of chapter 36, it says, "Then the princes said to Baruch, 'Go and hide, you and Jeremiah, and let no one know where you are.' And they went to the king into the court, but they stored the scroll in the chamber of Elishama the scribe and told all the words in the hearing of the king." And the king had no respect for this prophecy. He actually cuts up the scroll and burns it. But the princes believe the prophecy. They are bothered by what is said. They know Jeremiah is a real prophet, but they were wise, and I think this is part of God's providence, warning Baruch, "Go and hide, you and Jeremiah, and don't tell anybody where you are." They're not saying, "We want to know where you're hiding." They don't want to know where they're hiding. In verse 26, "And the king commanded Jerahmeel, the king's son, Sariah the son of Azriel, and Shelemiah the son of Abdiel, to seize Baruch the scribe and Jeremiah the prophet. But the Lord hid them." So we see that the Lord is definitely involved in keeping them safe, in hiding them so they're not found. But part of how he did that is through the wise advice of the princes saying, "Go ahead and hide, and don't tell anybody where you are." That's how God is keeping them safe from the king in this instance. There were times when he was imprisoned by false accusation, and yet he would be allowed some freedom, even by the king, who didn't even like his prophecies. The king who didn't respect the prophecies, but he'll still listen to Jeremiah on some level. In Jeremiah 37, verse 13 through 21, it talks about he was prophesying about how they should surrender, but he was accused of defecting to the Chaldeans in verse 13. In verse 14, then Jeremiah said, "False, I am not defecting to the Chaldeans." But he did not listen to him. So Arijah seized Jeremiah and brought him to the princes. Therefore the princes were angry with Jeremiah, and they struck him and put him in prison in the house of Jonathan the scribe, for they had made that the prison. And then eventually the king asked him, secretly, "Is there any word from the Lord?" And Jeremiah said, "Yeah, you're going to be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon." That's exactly what he's been prophesying. But then he says in verse 18 that he asked him, "What have I done? I haven't done anything wrong here. Why am I in prison?" And so in verse 21, then Zedekiah the king commanded that they should commit Jeremiah to the court of the prison, and that they should give him daily a piece of bread from the baker's street until all the bread in the city was gone. Thus Jeremiah remained in the court of the prison. So he had more freedom than he had before, and he was even having food, which I don't know if all the prisoners were getting food on a daily basis. They were under siege, so there wasn't a lot of food in the city that was available, but God saw to it that he got food, even though he used this wicked king to accomplish that. There were times that they tried to starve him to death because they didn't like his prophesying, but he's going to be saved by another servant of God. In Jeremiah 38, verse 4 through 6, therefore the princes said to the king, "Please let this man be put to death, for thus he weakens the hands of all the men of war who remain in this city, and the hands of all the people by speaking such words to them. For this man does not seek the welfare of this people, but their harm." Then Zedekiah the king said, "Look, he is in your hand, for the king can do nothing against you." So they took Jeremiah and cast him into the dungeon of Malchiah the king's son, which was in the court of the prison, and they let Jeremiah down with ropes. And in the dungeon there was not water but mire. So Jeremiah sank in the mire. But he's not going to die there. We're not going to read all of this because of time, but in Jeremiah 38, verse 7 through 13, we read about Ebed-Melech the Ethiopian. This is the original Ethiopian eunuch in the Bible, and he saves Jeremiah. He went to the king, got permission, and they pulled Jeremiah up with ropes, and he remained in the court of the prison so that he would not die. So even though Jeremiah had no way of saving himself from this situation, God used another servant of his, someone who feared him, who happened to not even be a Jew. He was an Ethiopian, an African, to save Jeremiah from this death of starvation. So God took care of Jeremiah. He also took care of his other faithful servants, even in very dangerous times. In Jeremiah 39, verse 11 through 14, it tells us that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, gave charge concerning Jeremiah to Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, saying, "Take him and look after him and do him no harm, but do to him just as he says to you." And that's what they did. They took care of him after they conquered Jerusalem. But why would Nebuchadnezzar say anything about Jeremiah? I imagine because Daniel was already serving with Nebuchadnezzar by this time and had probably spoken to him about Jeremiah. That's speculation, but somehow God used these wicked people, Nebuchadnezzar and Nebuzaradan, the Babylonians, to take care of Jeremiah. Also, Ebed-Melech, God sent word through Jeremiah to Ebed-Melech the Ethiopian, telling him that he would be delivered. They would not kill him. Even though many of the king's officials were put to death, Ebed-Melech was not, because of his faith in God, because of what he did on behalf of the Lord. In Jeremiah 45, we read about Baruch, that scribe, who assisted Jeremiah in writing his words as well as proclaiming them to the people. And God told him, you're not going to have an easy life. You're not going to have great success in life. In verse 5, he says, "And do you seek great things for yourself? Do not seek them. For behold, I will bring adversity on all flesh, says the Lord. But I will give your life to you as a prize in all places wherever you go." What a great blessing. God's providence was taking care of him. He says, look, everybody's going to suffer. You're going to suffer too, but I'm going to keep you alive. You're not going to be killed. So in the book of Jeremiah, we see God's providence very clearly. And it didn't keep them from suffering, but it did keep the suffering from being as bad as what was experienced by those who rejected God. In his providence, sometimes God used faithful servants to help Jeremiah to do his work or to save him from death. Sometimes God used unfaithful servants like the king or even the Babylonians to save Jeremiah and others as well. But we need to be bold and do what God says, trust him to save us in his way, and even if we die, we know that through God's provision, we're going to be fine. And, if it's according to his plan, that's fine. We just need to trust him and do things his way like Jeremiah did. All right. Thank you so much.